The sound of a hand striking flesh echoed across the market square, and Marcus Delac, while moved before his mind could catch up to his body, his daughter's hand clutched tight in his own as he pushed through the crowd toward the commotion. He had learned in his 32 years that hesitation cost lives, and though the war was 5 years behind him now, some instincts never dulled. The crowd parted reluctantly, revealing a scene that made his jaw tighten with a familiar anger he thought he had left on distant battlefields. A young orc woman knelt in the dirt, one hand pressed to her cheek, where an angry red mark was already blooming across her green skin. She could not have been more than 20 summers old, her dark hair braided tightly against her skull, her clothes little more than rags that hung from her broad shoulders. Her amber eyes were downcast, fixed on the ground as a portly human man in fine merchant silk stood over her, his face twisted with rage. "Clumsy beast," the merchant spat, gesturing to a broken crate at his feet where apples had spilled across the cobblestones. "Do you know how much you have cost me? Your worthless hide is not worth half the value of what you have destroyed." The orc woman said nothing, did not even raise her eyes, and something about her absolute stillness struck Marcus as profoundly wrong. This was not mere submission. This was someone who had learned that any response would only make things worse. "Papa, why is that man being mean to the orc lady?" His daughter Lily's voice was high and clear in the sudden quiet, carrying across the square with the perfect pitch that only a 7-year-old could achieve. Several people in the crowd turned to look at them, and Marcus felt the weight of their judgment even as he squeezed Lily's hand gently. "I do not know, sweetheart," he said quietly, but his feet were already carrying him forward, that old soldier's instinct recognizing injustice, the way a wolf recognized the scent of blood. The merchant had drawn his foot back as if to kick the kneeling orc, and Marcus reached him in 3 long strides, his hand catching the man's shoulder and spinning him around with more force than was strictly necessary. The merchant stumbled, his face going from red to purple as he registered the interruption. "What is the meaning of this? Unhand me at once." The merchant tried to pull away, but Marcus held firm, his calloused farmer's hands easily restraining the softer man. "I think there has been enough excitement for one afternoon," Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded a company of soldiers. "The lady has had an accident. Surely a man of your obvious wealth can absorb the loss of a few apples without resorting to violence." "Lady," the merchant's laugh was ugly, full of contempt. "This creature is my property, bought and paid for with good coin. If I choose to discipline my own servant for her incompetence, that is my right under the law. Now release me before I call the town guard." Marcus felt Lily press against his leg, and he was suddenly, painfully aware of how his daughter was watching this interaction, how she would remember this moment and learn from whatever he did next. He had sworn when his wife died 3 years ago that he would raise their daughter to be kind, to be just, to see people rather than monsters or tools. That oath mattered more than the law, more than the disapproval he could already feel radiating from the gathered crowd. "The law also says that excessive cruelty to servants is grounds for forfeiture of contract," Marcus said, the words coming from some half-remembered lecture he had sat through during his military service. He had no idea if such a law existed in this particular township, but he said it with enough conviction that the merchant's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I am certain the magistrate would be very interested to hear about a merchant who beats his workers in the public square over an accident." It was a bluff, pure and simple, but the merchant was clearly the sort of man who traded more in intimidation than actual knowledge. His eyes darted around the crowd, perhaps calculating whether the watching townspeople would support him or condemn him. Marcus followed his gaze and saw mostly indifference. A few hostile glares directed at the orc woman, but also a handful of faces that showed discomfort with the scene they had witnessed. "Fine," the merchant said finally, jerking free from Marcus's grip and smoothing his rumpled silks with exaggerated dignity. "Take the worthless creature if you want her so badly. Her contract is yours for the price I paid, 50 silver coins. Otherwise, step aside and let me handle my property as I see fit." 50 silver coins. Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. He had perhaps 12 silver to his name, carefully saved from the small surplus his farm had produced over the last season. 50 was a fortune, enough to buy a good horse or repair his entire barn. It was money he simply did not have, especially not with winter coming and Lily needing new clothes and boots. He should walk away. The sensible part of his mind was screaming at him to apologize, to take Lily's hand and return to their shopping, to forget this orc woman and her troubles. He had his own daughter to think about, his own survival to ensure. He could not save everyone, could not right every wrong he witnessed. But Lily was looking up at him with those wide blue eyes that were so like her mother's, and the orc woman was still kneeling in the dirt with her hand pressed to her bruised cheek, and Marcus heard his own voice say, "I will take her contract, but I do not have 50 silver coins on me. Give me 3 days to gather the funds and I will meet you here with the full payment." The merchant's eyes narrowed with suspicion and calculation. "You expect me to simply hand over my property on the promise of future payment? Do you take me for a fool? I am Marcus Delac. Wah. I own the farm 3 miles west on the river road. Ask anyone here about my reputation. I pay my debts." Marcus kept his voice level, praying that his 5 years of quiet, honest living in this community would count for something now. A woman in the crowd spoke up, a baker whose shop Marcus frequented. "Marcus Delacroix is a good man, always pays on time and in full. If he says he will bring you the money, he will bring it." Others murmured agreement, and Marcus felt a swell of gratitude for these neighbors who barely knew him but were willing to vouch for his word. The merchant looked frustrated, clearly hoping to either extract his payment immediately or continue his abuse uninterrupted. 3 days, the merchant said finally. "But the creature stays with me until I have the coins in hand. I will not risk her running off and costing me everything. No." The word came out harder than Marcus intended, shaped by old battlefield command. "If I am purchasing her contract, she comes with me now. You have the word of these witnesses that I will pay. If I do not appear in 3 days with your money, you can come to my farm and reclaim her yourself." The standoff stretched for a long moment, merchant and farmer locked in a silent battle of wills while the crowd watched, and the orc woman remained frozen in the dirt. Finally, the merchant threw up his hands in disgust. "Fine, take her. But if you do not have my 50 silver in 3 days, I will have the magistrate seize your farm for theft. And you," he pointed at the orc woman without looking at her, "you are to obey your new master in all things until your contract is properly transferred. Is that understood?" The orc woman's voice was barely a whisper, rough as if from disuse. "Yes, master." The merchant stormed off through the crowd, which quickly dispersed now that the entertainment was over. Marcus stood there with Lily still pressed against his leg, and the orc woman still kneeling in the dirt, and the full weight of what he had just done came crashing down on him like a stone wall. He had just committed to paying 50 silver coins he did not have for a servant he did not need, all on some impulse born of righteous anger and his daughter's watching eyes. He took a slow breath, then crouched down in front of the orc woman, careful to keep his movements gentle and non-threatening. Up close, He could see that the mark on her cheek was already darkening to a bruise, could see old scars on her arms and shoulders that spoke of years of rough treatment. Her tusks were small and delicate for an orc, barely protruding past her lower lip, and her hands where they rested on her knees were trembling very slightly. "My name is Marcus," he said quietly. "This is my daughter, Lily. Can you stand?" The orc woman's amber eyes flickered up to meet his for just a moment before dropping back to the ground. "Yes, master. Just Marcus will do," he said, straightening and offering her his hand. She stared at it as if he had offered her a snake, confusion and wariness warring across her expressive face. After a long moment, she reached out and took his hand, her grip careful despite the obvious strength in her fingers. He helped her to her feet, noting that she stood nearly a head taller than him, her broad shoulders and muscular build speaking to the hard labor she had clearly been subjected to. "What is your name?" Marcus asked, releasing her hand and stepping back to give her space. Again that flicker of confusion, as if the question itself made no sense. "I am called whatever my master wishes to call me. But what name did your mother give you? What did your clan call you before you came to serve humans?" He kept his voice gentle, the same tone he used when Lily woke from nightmares about her mother. The orc woman's jaw worked silently for a moment, her eyes distant as if reaching for a memory long buried. "Gracia," she said finally. "I was called Gracia before. Gracia." Marcus nodded, committing the name to memory. "It is good to meet you, Gracia. I am sorry for the circumstances, but I am glad we could help. Come, let us finish our shopping and then we will head back to the farm. You must be hungry." He took Lily's hand again and started toward the market stalls, trusting that Gracia would follow. Behind him, he heard her soft footsteps, hesitant and uncertain. Lily twisted in his grip to look back at their new companion, her young face serious with thought. "Papa, why did that man call Gracia a creature? She is a person." Out of the mouths of children, Marcus thought, came truths that adults spent lifetimes trying to complicate. "You are absolutely right, sweetheart. She is a person, and she deserves to be treated with kindness and respect just like anyone else." "Is she going to live with us now?" "For a while, yes." Marcus had no idea what would happen after 3 days when the merchant came looking for his 50 silver coins. He supposed he could sell his plow horse, perhaps take a loan from the bank in the next town over, but the numbers still did not add up. He pushed the worry aside for now. 3 days was 3 days. He would find a solution somehow. They completed their shopping quickly, Marcus purchasing the flour and salt and other supplies he had come to town for, plus extra food that he had not planned on but would need now with an additional mouth to feed. Gracia followed them like a silent shadow, never speaking unless spoken to, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as if expecting attack or ambush. The walk back to the farm was pleasant despite the weight of his new worries, the autumn sun warm on his shoulders, and the leaves just beginning to turn gold and crimson in the trees that lined the road. Lily chattered happily about the chickens, and the new kittens in the barn, and how one of the cows had gotten out of the fence yesterday and eaten all of Mama's old flower garden. Marcus listened with half an ear, the other half of his attention on Gracia, who walked several paces behind them like a prisoner being escorted rather than a person simply traveling in company. "Gracia, you can walk beside us," he said, slowing his pace until she caught up. "You do not have to trail behind. It is not proper for a servant to walk alongside her master," Gracia said, but she maintained the position beside him rather than falling back again. "Well, I am not much concerned with proper," Marcus said. "I am a farmer and a father, not a lord. On my farm, we work together and we treat each other with respect. I expect you will earn your keep while you are here, yes, but you will be treated fairly and fed well and given a proper place to sleep. Is that acceptable to you?" Gracia turned to stare at him, her amber eyes wide with something that might have been disbelief or might have been the first fragile stirring of hope. "I do not understand." "You do not have to understand right now," Marcus said gently. "Just trust that I mean what I say, you will see." The farm came into view as they crested the hill. A modest homestead with a small wooden house, a barn in decent repair, and fields that stretched toward the river in neat furrows. It was not much, but it was his, bought with his military pension and 5 years of backbreaking labor. The sight of it always settled something in Marcus's chest, a reminder that he had survived the war and built something good from the ashes of that violence. Lily ran ahead toward the house, shouting about the new person who would be staying with them, probably to tell the chickens and cats all about their adventure. Marcus led Gracia to the barn, which was warm and full of the sweet smell of hay and animals. "You can sleep in the loft," he said, pointing to the ladder that led to the upper level where he stored feed and extra supplies. "I will bring you blankets and a proper pillow. There is a pump in the yard for washing, and meals are at sunrise, noon, and sunset. You are welcome to join Lily and me in the house, or if you prefer more privacy, I can bring your portions out here." Gracia followed him up the ladder, her movements careful as if she expected the wood to break beneath her weight. The loft was spacious and relatively clean, with a small window that let in the afternoon light. She stood in the center of the space, her arms wrapped around herself, and for the first time Marcus saw her truly look around as if seeing a place that might be hers, however temporarily. "This is more than I deserve," she said quietly. "This is the bare minimum of what any person deserves," Marcus corrected. "Now, I need to go help Lily with her lessons and start preparing dinner. If you are comfortable doing so, there is wood that needs splitting behind the barn, and the chicken coop could use cleaning. But if you need to rest after your ordeal in town, that is fine too. No one will punish you for taking time to recover." He left her there, still standing in the center of the loft with her arms wrapped around herself, and climbed back down to begin the evening chores. Lily met him at the barn door, her face flushed with excitement. "Papa, is Gracia really going to stay? Can she teach me about orcs? Do orcs eat different food than us? Can she show me how to be strong like her?" "One question at a time, little bird," Marcus said, ruffling his daughter's blonde curls. "Yes, she is staying for now. As for the rest, you will have to ask her yourself, but give her some time to settle in first, yes. She has had a very difficult day." They went into the house together, and Marcus started preparing dinner while Lily worked on her letters at the table. Through the window, he could see Gracia emerge from the barn and move toward the woodpile with mechanical precision. She picked up the axe and began splitting logs with smooth, efficient strikes, her movements speaking to years of hard labor. She worked steadily for over an hour without pause, reducing the entire woodpile to neatly split pieces ready for the stove. Marcus watched her work and felt a growing anger at the merchant who had treated her so poorly, at the system that allowed people to be bought and sold like livestock, at himself for not having the resources to simply free her from that contract entirely. But anger alone solved nothing. He focused instead on preparing a good meal, thick vegetable stew and fresh bread, enough to feed 3 people generously. When the food was ready, he stepped out onto the porch and called to Gracia. She set down the axe immediately and came toward the house, but stopped at the bottom of the steps as if there were an invisible wall preventing her from ascending. "Come inside," Marcus said. "Dinner is ready." "Servants eat in the barn," Gracia said, her voice carefully neutral. "Not on my farm." "Come inside. Wash your hands and sit at the table, please." She climbed the steps slowly, her eyes darting around as if expecting this to be some kind of trick or trap. Inside, she stood awkwardly near the door while Lily bounced excitedly around the table, chattering about her day and asking Marcus questions about everything and nothing. Marcus gestured to one of the chairs, and after a long hesitation, Gracia sat down gingerly, as if afraid the furniture might collapse beneath her. The meal was initially quiet except for Lily's ongoing monologue about the kittens and the chickens, and a book about dragons that Marcus had read to her the night before. Gracia ate slowly, almost reverently, as if each bite of bread and spoonful of stew were precious beyond measure. Marcus noticed that her hands shook slightly as she lifted her spoon, noticed the way she kept glancing at him as if expecting him to snatch the bowl away at any moment. "Is the food all right?" he asked. "I am not the best cook, but I do my best." "It is the finest meal I have had in years," Gracia said, her voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, master, thank you." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "Just Marcus." After dinner, Marcus showed Gracia where the blankets were stored and gave her 2 of the thick wool ones along with a pillow that was slightly lumpy but serviceable. She carried them to the barn as if they were made of gold, and Marcus watched her go with a heavy heart, wondering what kind of life she had lived that such basic kindness seemed like an impossible luxury. That night, after Lily was tucked into bed and the dishes were cleaned, Marcus sat at his small desk and tried to work out the mathematics of his situation. 12 silver coins saved. The fall harvest would bring in perhaps another 8 if he could sell the surplus grain at a good price. His plow horse would fetch maybe 15 silver if he could find a buyer quickly, but then he would have to borrow or rent animals for the spring planting. Even being generous with his estimates, he came up at least 15 silver short of the 50 he needed. He could take out a loan, but the interest rates the banks charged were predatory, designed to trap farmers in endless cycles of debt. He had seen too many good men lose their land that way. There had to be another solution, something he was not seeing. Marcus fell asleep at his desk, his head pillowed on his arms, and dreamed of distant battlefields where the enemies wore the faces of merchants and bankers. The next morning dawned clear and cold, frost sparkling on the grass in the early light. Marcus woke stiff and sore from sleeping in his chair, his mind still fuzzy with exhausted dreams. He built up the fire in the stove and started breakfast, simple oat porridge with honey and dried fruit. Lily stumbled out of her room still half asleep, and Marcus helped her dress and tied her hair back with a ribbon. When breakfast was ready, he called Gracia from the barn again. She appeared almost instantly, as if she had been awake and waiting for his summons. Her clothes were the same ragged things from yesterday, and Marcus made a mental note to find her something better to wear. Surely he had some of his old shirts that could be altered to fit her, or perhaps some of the clothes his wife had left behind. They ate together again, and this time Gracia seemed slightly less tense, though she still moved with the careful precision of someone expecting punishment for any wrong move. After breakfast, Marcus outlined the day's work. "The north field needs to be cleared of rocks before the first freeze," he said. "It is hard work, but necessary if we want to plant there in the spring. Gracia, if you are willing, I could use your help with that. Lily, you have your lessons this morning, and then you can gather eggs and help me with the mending." "Can Gracia tell me an orc story during my lessons?" Lily asked, looking at the older woman with bright, curious eyes. Gracia looked startled, her gaze flickering between Marcus and his daughter as if trying to determine if this was some kind of test. "I do not know if the stories of my people would be appropriate for a human child." "Are they very scary?" Lily asked. "Some are." Some are about heroes and great hunts. Some are funny tales about foolish spirits and clever animals. A hint of something that might have been a smile touched Grash's lips. I have not thought about those stories in a very long time. Then tell me a funny one, Lily declared. Papa's stories are sometimes too serious. I will try, Grasha said, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression, a tiny crack in the wall of careful subservience. They worked through the morning, Marcus and Grasha in the field hauling rocks and piling them at the edge to be used later for repairing the fence, while Lily studied her letters at the kitchen table. The work was back-breaking, exactly the kind of labor that Marcus usually dreaded. But Grasha worked with tireless efficiency, moving stones that would have taken Marcus 10 minutes of struggle as if they weighed nothing. Her strength was remarkable, but more than that, she seemed to find a kind of peace in the physical labor, her movements becoming less tense as the morning progressed. At noon they broke for lunch, and true to her word, Grasha told Lily a story about a young orc who tried to impress a hunting party by tracking what he thought was a great beast, only to discover he had been following the tracks of a confused rabbit walking in circles. Lily laughed delightedly, and Marcus found himself chuckling as well at Grasha's animated delivery, the way her voice shifted to imitate the proud young orc and the exasperated elder teaching him proper tracking skills. "You are a good storyteller," Marcus said when the tale was finished. Lily loves stories. I fear I am not very creative with them. My mother was the storyteller of our clan, Grasha said, then seemed to catch herself, her expression closing off again as if she had revealed too much. You must miss her, Marcus said gently. Grasha said nothing, but her hands tightened around her cup of water, her knuckles going pale green with the pressure. That afternoon, while Marcus worked on repairing a section of fence and Lily napped, he saw Grasha standing at the edge of the property, looking out toward the forest that marked the boundary between human settlements and the wild lands beyond. She stood very still, her face turned toward the trees as if she could see something there that was invisible to human eyes. Marcus watched her for a long moment, wondering what she was thinking, what memories might be playing behind those amber eyes. He did not disturb her. Some grief was too private for witnesses. The second day followed much the same pattern. Work, meals shared at the table, Lily's endless questions answered with increasing warmth by Grasha. Marcus noticed that the orc woman was sleeping better, the dark circles under her eyes beginning to fade. She smiled more readily now, especially when Lily said something particularly absurd or precocious. But the shadow of the coming debt still hung over Marcus like a thundercloud, and he spent his evenings desperately trying to figure out where he could possibly find the remaining silver he needed. On the evening of the second day, as Marcus was cleaning up after dinner, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find his neighbor, a grizzled old farmer named Thomas who owned the land to the south. "Evening, Marcus," Thomas said, his weathered face creased with concern. "Mind if I come in for a moment?" "Of course." Marcus stepped aside, gesturing Thomas into the small sitting room. Through the doorway to the kitchen, he could see Grasha stiffen, her eyes going wide with alarm. He gave her what he hoped was a reassuring look before following Thomas inside. "I heard about what happened in town," Thomas said without preamble. "Heard you took on an orc servant and promised 50 silver to that bastard merchant Carlyle." "Word travels fast," Marcus said dryly. "In a town this size, everything travels fast." Thomas leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, Marcus, you are a good man and I respect what you did. Standing up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves, that takes spine, but 50 silver is a lot of money, more than a lot. Are you sure you know what you are doing, honestly?" "No." Marcus rubbed his face tiredly. I acted on instinct. It was the right thing to do, but I have no idea how I am going to pay for it." Thomas nodded slowly, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He set it on the table between them with a heavy clink of coins. 15 silver. It is what I can spare. Call it a loan if it makes you feel better, to be paid back whenever you can manage it, or call it payment for all the times you have helped me with my harvest without asking for anything in return." Marcus stared at the pouch, emotion thick in his throat. "Thomas, I cannot take this. You need that money for your own family." "My family is grown and gone, making their own way in the world. I am an old man with more money than years left to spend it. Take it, Marcus. Let an old fool help a young one for once." "I am not that young anymore," Marcus said, but he picked up the pouch, feeling the weight of generosity and friendship in his palm. "Thank you, Thomas, truly. I do not know what to say. Say you will keep doing what you are doing. Treating people right, raising that daughter of yours to be good and kind, that is payment enough." Thomas stood, preparing to leave, then paused. "And Marcus, that orc woman, treat her right too. I fought in the border wars same as you. I know what we did to their people. Maybe it is time we started making that right, one person at a time." After Thomas left, Marcus sat for a long time holding the pouch of silver, feeling the weight of his community's faith in him. With Thomas's 15 silver added to his own 12, he had 27 coins. He still needed 23 more, and he had less than a day to find them. He went to the barn that evening, climbing the ladder to the loft where Gracia was organizing the hay into neat bales. She turned when she heard him approach, her expression guarded. "Is something wrong, Master Marcus?" "Just Marcus," he corrected automatically. "And no, nothing is wrong. I just wanted to talk to you about tomorrow." Gracia's hand stilled on the hay. "Tomorrow the merchant comes for his payment." "Yes. I want you to know that I am doing everything I can to gather the money, but I also want to be honest with you. I may not be able to come up with the full amount. If that happens, Carlyle will have the legal right to take you back." Marcus took a breath, hating what he had to say next. "If it comes to that, I want you to know that you do not have to stay with him. You could run. Head for the forests, find your people again. I would give you supplies, a head start. He would come after me for breach of contract, but that is my problem to deal with." Gracia was quiet for a long moment, her face unreadable in the dim light of the lantern. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me?" "Because every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Because my daughter is watching how I act, and I want her to grow up knowing that kindness matters more than profit. Because it is the right thing to do." Marcus met her eyes steadily. "And because in the short time I have known you, I have seen your strength, your gentleness with Lily, your quiet grace. You deserve better than to be someone's property." "I have not been part of a clan in 8 years, Gracia said, her voice distant with old pain. "My father sold my contract to pay a debt when I was barely more than a child. I do not know if I would even be welcome among my people anymore. Orcs who serve humans are considered traitors, tainted by your world. Then you could stay here if you wanted, not as a servant. As a free woman, working for fair wages and a place to sleep and food to eat. I cannot offer much, but I can offer that." The words came out before Marcus had fully thought them through, but once spoken, he realized he meant them completely. Gracia's eyes glistened with tears that she blinked away rapidly. "You barely know me. I know enough. The rest we can learn as we go." He left her then, descending the ladder and returning to the house where Lily was already asleep in her bed. Her blonde hair spread across her pillow like a halo. Marcus kissed her forehead gently, then returned to his desk to stare at his columns of numbers, searching desperately for a solution that continued to elude him. The third day dawned gray and cold, clouds hanging low over the fields like a burial shroud. Marcus woke with a sense of dread heavy in his chest, knowing that by sunset his fate and Gracia's would be decided one way or another. He made breakfast mechanically, his mind churning through increasingly desperate plans. Lily seemed to sense his mood and was quieter than usual, her young face serious. Gracia came to breakfast when called, but she ate little, her eyes distant and resigned. After the meal, Marcus went to the barn and began preparing a pack of supplies, food and water and a warm cloak, things Gracia would need if she chose to run. He was laying out a map of the region, showing her the paths through the forest that would take her toward the mountains where orc clans still lived free, when he heard horses approaching. His heart sank. It was too early. The merchant was not supposed to arrive until evening. Marcus hurried out of the barn to find not one but 3 riders approaching the farm. He recognized Carlyle, the merchant, on a fine bay horse. But the other 2 riders were unfamiliar, hard-faced men who had the look of hired muscle. Marcus walked out to meet them, keeping his body between the riders and the house where Lily was watching from the window. Carlyle dismounted with a smug expression, his eyes already searching for Gracia. "Good morning, Mr. Delacroix. I am here for my payment, or to reclaim my property. Whichever you are prepared to provide." "Our agreement was for payment by the end of the day," Marcus said evenly. "It is barely past breakfast. I am a busy man with many affairs to manage. I decided to handle this matter early." Carlyle pulled a document from his coat. "Do you have my 50 silver coins?" Marcus felt the weight of the coin pouch at his belt, Thomas's generous contribution and his own savings amounting to barely half of what he needed. "I have 27 silver, with more coming throughout the day." 27. Carlyle's laugh was sharp and mocking. "That is not even close to what you owe. I am afraid your credit is no good here, farmer. I will take my servant back now, and these gentlemen will accompany us to the magistrate where you will face charges for breach of contract and attempted theft." "I have until sunset," Marcus insisted. "Those were your terms, witnessed by half the town. And I have changed my mind. The orc comes with me now, or you pay the full 50 silver. Those are your options." The 2 hired men dismounted as well, their hands resting meaningfully on the clubs at their belts. Marcus tensed, old battle instincts flooding through him, calculating angles and vulnerabilities. He could probably take one of them before they got him down, maybe both if he was lucky and fast. But that would just make everything worse, would put Lily at risk. "What is happening?" Gracia's voice came from behind him, and Marcus turned to see her emerging from the barn, her face pale but determined. "Master Marcus, you do not need to fight for me. I will go with the merchant." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I made a promise." "A promise you cannot keep," Carlyle said, gesturing to his men. "Seize the orc. We are leaving." The 2 thugs started forward, and Marcus moved to intercept them, but before anyone could come to blows, another voice rang out across the yard. "I would advise against that." Everyone turned to see a figure approaching from the road, walking with the steady, purposeful gait of someone who had traveled through the night. As the figure drew closer, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The newcomer was an orc, but unlike any orc Marcus had seen before. He was tall and powerfully built, wearing well-made traveling clothes and carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a warrior and leader. His green skin was decorated with ritual scars, and his tusks were larger than Gracia's, carved with intricate patterns. His eyes, the same amber as Gracia's, were fixed on the merchant with cold fury. "Who in the blazes are you?" Carlyle demanded, his confidence wavering slightly in the face of this imposing newcomer. "My name is Urgoth," the orc said, his voice deep and commanding, "and I have been searching for my daughter for 8 years." Gracia made a small, wounded sound, her hand flying to her mouth. "Father!" Urgoth's stern expression cracked, emotion flooding his features as he looked at Gracia. "Yes, little one, it is me. I am so sorry it took me this long to find you." The tableau held for a frozen moment, everyone trying to process this new development. Then Carlyle, recovering his bluster, stepped forward with his contract waving. "I do not care who you are. This orc is my legal property, purchased fairly. You have no claim here." "Actually, I do." Urgoth reached into his own coat and pulled out a rolled parchment sealed with wax. "This is a decree from the regional magistrate, invalidating all contracts of servitude for my daughter, Gracia, daughter of Urgoth, on the grounds that she was sold into service while still a minor without proper consent of her guardian. All such contracts are null and void." Carlyle's face went from red to purple. "That is impossible. I bought her contract in good faith. I paid good money." "Then take your complaint to the magistrate who signed this document. Or better yet, take it up with the Lord who invalidated all such fraudulent contracts last month as part of the new labor reforms." Urgoth's smile was not pleasant. "I have been traveling from town to town, tracking down my daughter and freeing her from illegal bondage. You are welcome to try to challenge this in court, but I assure you, you will lose." Marcus watched this exchange with growing amazement and relief. He had no idea if Urgoth was telling the truth about the magistrate and the labor reforms, but the orc spoke with such conviction and authority that even Carlyle seemed to believe him. The merchant snatched the parchment and examined it, his face growing paler as he read. "This is absurd. This is theft." But Carlyle's bluster was fading, replaced by the realization that he had lost this fight. "What is absurd," Urgoth said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl, "is a society that allows children to be sold like livestock. What is theft is the 8 years of my daughter's life that were stolen from her. Be grateful I am choosing to handle this through legal channels rather than the traditional methods my people used to settle such matters." The implied threat hung in the air. Carlyle looked between Urgoth's imposing figure and his 2 hired thugs, clearly calculating whether it was worth trying to fight this. Finally, he threw up his hands in disgust. "Keep her then. I hope she causes you nothing but trouble." He remounted his horse and gestured sharply to his men. "We are leaving. This farm is cursed by orc lovers anyway." They rode off in a cloud of dust and impotent rage, and as soon as they were out of sight, Gracia's knees seemed to give out. She sank to the ground, her whole body shaking with sobs. Urgoth was at her side in an instant, kneeling in the dirt and gathering her into his arms, murmuring words in the orcish language that Marcus did not understand, but that clearly meant everything to Gracia. Marcus turned away to give them privacy, suddenly feeling the full weight of exhaustion and relief crash over him. It was done. Gracia was free. He would not lose his farm or face charges of theft. Everything had somehow worked out, though not at all in the way he had expected. Lily came running out of the house, her eyes wide with excitement. "Papa, is that really Gracia's father? Is she going to leave with him?" "I do not know, sweetheart," Marcus said, picking her up and settling her on his hip. "That is her choice to make." They waited while Urgoth and Gracia had their reunion, the orc man and his daughter holding each other and speaking in quiet voices. Finally, they rose and approached Marcus, Gracia's hand firmly clasped in her father's. "You are Marcus de Lacroix," Urgoth said. "It was not a question." "I am." "My daughter tells me you protected her from the merchant, that you offered to pay for her contract, money you did not have, simply because it was the right thing to do." I did what anyone should have done, Marcus said simply, but you are the one who actually did it. Urgoth studied Marcus for a long moment, his amber eyes sharp and assessing. I owe you a great debt, human. You showed my daughter kindness when she had known nothing but cruelty for years. You gave her hope when she had forgotten what hope felt like. That is not a debt easily repaid. No debt is owed. I am just glad Gracia is free and reunited with you. That is payment enough. Urgoth nodded slowly, then glanced down at his daughter. Gracia was looking at the farmhouse, at the barn, at the field she had helped clear of stones, with an expression Marcus could not quite read. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Father, I am grateful beyond words that you found me. I thought I would never see you again. She took a shaky breath. But I do not know if I am ready to leave yet. Urgoth's eyebrows rose in surprise. What do you mean, little one? This place, these people, they have shown me what it means to be treated with dignity. For the first time in 8 years, I have felt like a person rather than a thing. Gracia looked at Marcus, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Marcus offered to let me stay here, working as a free woman for fair wages. I would like to take some time to remember who I am, to heal from what was done to me, before I make decisions about where I belong. You belong with your clan, with your people, Urgoth said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. Perhaps. But I need to find out if that is true, not just assume it because it is what is expected. Gracia straightened her shoulders, and Marcus saw in her posture the echo of her father's warrior bearing. I am asking for time, Father. Time to work and heal and remember what it means to make my own choices. Urgoth was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between his daughter and Marcus. Finally, he sighed deeply. You have grown in ways I did not expect. 8 years is a long time. Of course you need time to find yourself again. I understand that. Thank you, Father. But I am not leaving you alone in the human lands with no protection. If you are staying here to work and heal, then I am staying nearby to ensure you are safe. Urgoth turned to Marcus. If you are willing to have Gracia work on your farm, then I offer my own labor as well. 2 sets of hands are better than one, and I have skills that might prove useful. Marcus blinked in surprise. He had gone from having no help at all to suddenly having 2 orc workers, one of whom was apparently a warrior of some standing. I cannot pay much, he said honestly. I have a small farm, not a large estate. I can offer fair wages, food, and shelter, but it will not make you wealthy. Wealth is not what I seek, Urgoth said. I seek to be near my daughter and to repay the kindness you showed her. If you are willing to accept our help, we are willing to give it. Marcus looked at Gracia, who was watching him with hope and uncertainty in her amber eyes, then at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect of having 2 orcs living on their farm. He thought about the work that needed to be done, the fields to be cleared and planted, the fences to be mended, the 100 tasks that always seemed to multiply faster than he could complete them. But more than that, he thought about the conversation he and Gracia had shared in the barn loft, about dignity and respect and second chances. He thought about the kind of community he wanted to build, the kind of world he wanted Lily to grow up in. You are both welcome here, Marcus said firmly. For as long as you wish to stay. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm, one that Marcus had never imagined when he first intervened in the market square. Urgoth proved to be a tireless worker with skills that complemented Gracia's strength beautifully. Together, the 3 of them accomplished in a week what would have taken Marcus a month working alone. The north field was not only cleared of rocks but properly plowed and ready for spring planting. The barn roof was repaired, fixing leaks that Marcus had been putting off for years. The fences were mended and reinforced. But beyond the physical labor, something else was growing on the farm. Marcus found himself looking forward to the evenings when they would all gather around the dinner table, Lily chattering about her day while Urgoth told stories of Orcish history, and Gracia slowly, tentatively, began to share her own memories of life before her servitude. The orc father and daughter would sometimes speak in their own language, and Marcus would watch the way Gracia's face lit up when she recalled words and phrases she had nearly forgotten. Urgoth had set up a tent near the barn, insisting that Marcus should not have to house 2 full-grown orcs in his small farmhouse. But Gracia remained in the barn loft, and Marcus often saw her standing at the small window in the evenings, looking out over the farm with an expression of quiet contentment. On the 4th night after Urgoth's arrival, Marcus was working on his accounts when there was a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find Gracia standing on the porch, her hands twisted together nervously. "Is something wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately concerned. "No, nothing is wrong. I just wanted to talk to you if you have time." "Of course, come in." They sat in the small sitting room, the fire crackling in the hearth. Gracia seemed to struggle with how to begin, her eyes fixed on her hands. "I have been thinking about what you said in the barn," she finally started. "About staying here as a free woman working for wages. I want to make sure you understand what that would mean." "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned forward, his attention fully on her. "I mean that I am not like human women. I am stronger, I eat more, I take up more space. There will be people in town who will judge you for keeping an orc on your farm, who will say ugly things about you and about Lily. Your life would be simpler if you let me go with my father, find my place somewhere far from here." Gracia's voice was steady, but her eyes were vulnerable. "I do not want to be a burden or a source of shame." Marcus felt a surge of emotion, part anger at the prejudices she was describing and part something else, something warmer and more complicated that he was not quite ready to name. "Gracia, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, and he held her gaze steadily. "You are not a burden. You are a person who deserves respect and dignity and a chance to build the life you choose. If people want to judge me for treating you fairly, then they can judge all they want. I have faced worse than gossip." He took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "And for what it is worth, I like having you here. Lily adores you. You have brought laughter and joy back to this house in ways I did not realize we were missing. So if you want to stay, please stay. Not because you owe me anything, but because this is where you want to be." Gracia's eyes filled with tears, and this time she did not blink them away. "I was so scared when my father found me. Scared that he would be ashamed of what I had become, ashamed that I had let myself be broken down by years of servitude. But when he looks at me, he does not see a failure. He sees his daughter who survived, and when you look at me, you see a person worthy of kindness." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I want to stay, Marcus. I want to work on this farm and help it thrive. I want to watch Lily grow up and teach her that orcs and humans can live together in peace. I want to believe that I can have a life that is more than just surviving." "Then stay," Marcus said simply. "Stay as long as you want. This is your home now if you wish it to be." Gracia nodded, unable to speak, and Marcus reached out to gently squeeze her hand. Her fingers were warm and strong, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling and the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging in the air between them. Over the following weeks, the farm flourished in ways Marcus had never managed on his own. With 3 adults working together, they were able to take on projects that had seemed impossible before. They built a proper chicken coop with a secured run to protect the birds from foxes. They constructed a smokehouse for preserving meat. Urgoth, who turned out to have considerable skill with carpentry, crafted new furniture for the house. including a larger table that could comfortably seat all of them, and a proper bed frame for Lily, to replace the worn rope bed she had been using. Lily thrived under the attention of her extended household. Gracia taught her about plants and herbs, knowledge passed down through generations of orc healers. Urgoth showed her how to track animals by their prints and taught her basic self-defense moves, though always with the caveat that fighting was a last resort when all other options had failed. Marcus watched his daughter blossom, her natural curiosity and joy expanding to encompass this new world of orcish culture and wisdom. But it was the quiet moments that Marcus treasured most. Working beside Gracia in the fields, their movements synchronized through growing familiarity. Evenings by the fire when Urgoth would tell tales of great orcish heroes, and Gracia would lean forward with rapt attention, reclaiming pieces of her heritage. The way Gracia would catch his eye across the dinner table and smile, a real smile full of warmth and something else that made Marcus's heart beat faster. He tried not to think too much about that something else. Gracia was still healing, still finding herself after years of trauma. The last thing she needed was her employer developing feelings that would complicate her new freedom. So Marcus kept his growing affection carefully hidden, treating Gracia with the same respectful kindness he always had, never crossing the invisible line that separated employer from something more. But Urgoth noticed. Marcus realized this one evening when the older orc asked him to help gather firewood, a task that hardly required two people. They worked in silence for a while before Urgoth spoke. "My daughter is growing happier here," Urgoth said, his tone carefully neutral. "I see her smile more than she has in years. She sings while she works. That is something she did as a child before she was taken from me." "I am glad," Marcus said honestly. "She deserves happiness. She does. And I think she deserves love as well when she is ready for it." Urgoth set down the wood he was carrying and fixed Marcus with a direct stare. "I see the way you look at her, human. The way you are careful never to stand too close, never to touch her except in the most casual and necessary ways. You are trying very hard not to make her uncomfortable." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I respect her. She has been through enough without me complicating things. Respect is good, but you should know that she looks at you the same way when she thinks no one is watching." Urgoth's expression softened slightly. "I have spent the last 8 years searching for my daughter, imagining all the terrible things that might have happened to her. The reality was worse than I feared in many ways. She was broken down, made to feel worthless, treated as less than an animal. But then I find her here, on this farm, with this human man who defended her without expecting anything in return, who treated her like a person when no one else would." "I only did what was right," Marcus protested. "Exactly. You did what was right without hesitation at great potential cost to yourself. Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" Urgoth shook his head. "I am not saying you should rush her or pressure her. But I am saying that when the time is right, do not let fear of what is proper, or what others might think stop you from being honest about what you feel. My daughter has spent 8 years living according to what others demanded of her. She deserves to make her own choices now, including who she might care for." Marcus absorbed this in silence, his mind churning. "And if her choice is not me, if she sees me only as a friend or employer, then you respect that and move forward as you have been. But you will never know unless you are honest with her and with yourself." Urgoth clapped him on the shoulder with enough force to make Marcus stagger slightly. "Just think about it, human. That is all I ask." The conversation stayed with Marcus through the following days, coloring every interaction with Gracia. He found himself noticing small things he had been trying to ignore. The way she would touch his arm when she wanted his attention, her hand lingering just a moment longer than necessary. The way her face would light up when he praised her work or thanked her for her help. The way she would seek out his company in the evenings, sitting close enough that their shoulders almost touched as they watched Lily play. Winter was approaching now, the days growing shorter and colder. They worked together to prepare the farm for the harsh season ahead, stocking the root cellar with preserved foods, securing the barn against snow and ice, chopping enough firewood to keep them warm through the darkest months. Urgoth announced that he would be traveling to the nearest orc settlement to trade and gather news, giving Marcus and Gracia a chance to talk privately if they needed it. The night before Urgoth was set to leave, a storm rolled in across the valley, bringing sleet and howling winds. Marcus made sure all the animals were secured in the barn, then rushed back to the house where Lily was already tucked into bed, listening to the storm rage outside with wide eyes. "Is everyone going to be all right?" she asked worriedly. "Everyone is fine," Marcus assured her, smoothing her hair back. "Gracia and your grandfather Urgoth are safe in the barn, and we are safe here. The storm will pass by morning." "I like calling him grandfather," Lily said sleepily. "Is that all right?" "He said I could, but I wanted to make sure you did not mind." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think that is wonderful, sweetheart. I am sure it makes him very happy." He stayed with Lily until she fell asleep, then returned to the main room where he built up the fire and tried to settle down with a book. But his mind kept wandering to the barn, wondering if Gracia and Urgoth were warm enough, if the wind was getting through the walls he had meant to patch before winter. A knock at the door startled him from his worried thoughts. He opened it to find Gracia standing in the storm, her hair plastered to her head with sleet, her clothes soaked through. "Gracia, what are you doing out in this weather? Come inside." He pulled her into the house, quickly shutting the door against the wind. "Are you all right?" "Is something wrong with the barn?" "The barn is fine. My father is asleep." Gracia stood dripping on his floor, her amber eyes bright and determined. "I needed to talk to you, and I did not want to wait." Marcus grabbed a blanket from the back of the chair and draped it around her shoulders, his hands lingering just a moment before he pulled away. "You could have waited until morning. You are going to catch your death of cold." "Orcs do not catch cold as easily as humans," Gracia said, but she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "All right," Marcus said, his heart suddenly pounding. Gracia took a deep breath, then the words came out in a rush. "I know I have only been truly free for a few weeks. I know I am still finding myself, still healing from what was done to me. But I also know that I feel something for you, something that grows stronger every day. When I work beside you in the fields, when we share meals, when you smile at something Lily says, I feel happy in a way I have not felt since I was a child. And I do not think it is just gratitude, though I am grateful. I think it is something more." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Gracia held up her hand. "Let me finish. I have thought about this a great deal, talked to my father about it. He says I should be honest about what I feel, that I deserve to make my own choices. So I am choosing to tell you the truth. I care for you, Marcus. Not as an employer or a savior, but as a man. As someone I admire and respect and want to know better. And I think, I hope, that maybe you feel something similar." She finally stopped, her chest heaving slightly from the speed of her confession, her eyes locked on his face as if trying to read his thoughts. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his mind spinning, and then everything seemed to click into place with perfect clarity. "I do," he said simply. "I feel the same way. I have been trying not to, trying to be respectful and give you space, but yes, I care for you, Gracia. More than I probably should, more than is wise considering you work for me and we barely know each other. But I cannot help it. You are strong and kind and resilient, and when you smile it makes my whole day brighter. I did not expect to feel this way about anyone again after my wife died, but here we are. Gracia's face transformed with joy, a radiant smile that made her absolutely beautiful. Here we are, she echoed. They stood looking at each other, neither quite sure what to do next. Then Marcus took a step forward, closing the distance between them, and carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was cold from the storm but warming rapidly in the heat of the fire. Her tusks pressed gently against his palms, and he ran his thumb along one in a gesture that was tender rather than uncertain. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Please," Gracia whispered. He kissed her gently at first, mindful of her tusks and the newness of this between them. But Gracia responded with surprising passion, her arms coming up to wrap around him, pulling him closer. The blanket fell to the floor forgotten as they stood in the firelight, discovering each other through touch and breath, and the simple joy of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers and laughed softly. "I feel like a young man again, nervous and excited all at once. I feel like I am waking up from a long dream," Gracia said. "Like the world is suddenly full of colors I had forgotten existed." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, listening to the storm rage outside while inside there was warmth and peace and the beginning of something beautiful. "You should probably get back to the barn before your father worries," Marcus said reluctantly. "And you need to get into dry clothes before you do catch cold, orc constitution or not." "I know." But Gracia did not move, her arms still wrapped around him. "Marcus, I want to do this right. I want to take time to know you properly, to court you the way my people would. Is that acceptable?" "More than acceptable." Marcus pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "I want that too. We have time now, time to do things properly. No rushing, no pressure. Just two people learning about each other and seeing where this might lead." Gracia nodded, then kissed him once more, brief and sweet, before pulling away. She gathered up the blanket and moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the latch. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. For defending me, for giving me a home, for seeing me as more than what I was forced to be." "Thank you for trusting me," Marcus replied, "for being brave enough to speak your heart. Sleep well, Gracia." She slipped out into the storm, and Marcus watched through the window until he saw the glow of a lantern in the barn, indicating she had made it back safely. Then he sank into his chair by the fire, a smile on his face that refused to fade, and let himself imagine a future that had seemed impossible just a few hours ago. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed in the night. Urgoth left for his trading journey with a knowing look at Marcus and a quiet word to his daughter that made Gracia blush a deep green. With Urgoth gone, the farm felt quieter but also more intimate. Just Marcus and Gracia working side by side while Lily played and practiced her lessons. They began courting in the Orcish tradition, which Gracia explained involved proving one's worth through deeds and gifts rather than mere words. Marcus found himself working harder than ever, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to show Gracia that he was serious about his feelings. He repaired things around the farm that had been broken for months, built her a proper writing desk so she could practice the letters he was teaching her, carved small figurines of animals that made her laugh with delight. Gracia, in turn, cooked him special meals from Orcish recipes her mother had taught her, sang working songs in her native language while they labored in the fields, and began teaching him words and phrases in Orcish so they could share that part of her heritage. She was patient with his clumsy pronunciation, her laughter when he mangled a word never mocking but genuinely amused. Lily watched all of this with the keen observation of a child and seemed utterly delighted by the growing affection between her father and Gracia. She began plotting little moments to leave them alone together, announcing she needed to check on the chickens or play in the barn, giving them space to talk and simply be together. One evening, about 2 weeks after Ergoth had left, Marcus and Gracia were sitting by the fire after Lily had gone to bed. Gracia was working on her writing, carefully forming letters on a slate, while Marcus mended a shirt. The silence between them was comfortable, full of quiet contentment. "Marcus," Gracia said suddenly, setting down her slate, "I need to tell you something about my past, something I should have mentioned before, but I was afraid." Marcus set aside his mending, giving her his full attention. "You can tell me anything. My father is not just any orc. He is Ergoth the Peacemaker, a chief among our people known for trying to forge treaties with humans during the border wars. He was one of the voices calling for peace when most orcs wanted only vengeance for what your kind had done to ours." Gracia's voice was steady, but her hands were twisting together nervously. "When I was taken, when I was sold, it was not just a personal tragedy. It was seen by many as proof that humans could not be trusted, that my father's peace efforts were foolish and naive. My disappearance nearly started another war." Marcus felt the weight of this revelation settle over him. "I had no idea. How could you? To you and to that merchant, I was just another orc servant. But to my people, I am the daughter of a chief, a symbol of everything wrong with human-orc relations." Gracia met his eyes, her expression vulnerable. "If we continue this, if we pursue a relationship, it will not be simple. There will be orcs who see it as a betrayal, humans who see it as perversion. It could cause problems for you, for Lily, for my father's work toward peace." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking through the implications. Then he reached out and took Gracia's hands in his, stilling their nervous movement. "Let me tell you something about my past," he said. "During the war, I was a soldier who followed orders without question. I did things I am not proud of, hurt people who were probably just trying to defend their homes and families. When I came back, I swore I would spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that, trying to be better than the man I was during those dark years." He squeezed her hands gently. "If our relationship can help bridge the gap between our peoples, if it can show that humans and orcs can find common ground and even love, then that seems like the best possible use of my life. Yes, there will be challenges, but anything worth having is worth fighting for." Gracia's eyes filled with tears. "You are a remarkable man, Marcus Delacroix. I am just a farmer trying to do right by the people I care about." He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, curling against his side with her head on his shoulder. "Whatever comes, we will face it together. You, me, Lily, and your father when he returns. We will build something good here, something that proves love is stronger than old hatreds." They sat that way for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, imagining a future that was still uncertain but filled with hope. Ergoth returned 3 weeks later, accompanied by a small group of orcs who he introduced as members of his council. They had come, he explained, to see for themselves where his daughter was living, and to assess whether the arrangement was acceptable. Marcus welcomed them with the same courtesy he would have shown any visitors, offering food and shelter and answering their questions honestly about the farm and his relationship with Gracia. The council members were initially skeptical, their questions pointed and sometimes hostile. But over the course of several days, as they watched Marcus and Gracia work together, saw the way Lily interacted with Gracia with genuine affection and respect, observed the easy partnership that had developed, Their attitudes began to soften. On the final evening before the council was set to return to their settlements, the eldest among them, a female orc named Kratha with scars that marked her as a veteran of many battles, asked to speak with Marcus privately. They walked together through the fields, now fallow for the winter, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple. "You love her," Kratha said. "It was not a question." "I do," Marcus confirmed. "And she loves you. I can see it in the way she looks at you, the way she speaks your name." Kratha stopped walking and turned to face him. "I fought against humans for 40 years. I saw what your kind did to my people, saw cities burned and children orphaned. I have every reason to hate you and everyone like you." Marcus said nothing, simply met her gaze steadily. "But I also see the way my chief's daughter has healed here, the light that has returned to her eyes. I see a human man who treats her with respect and dignity, who has given her freedom and choice. And I think perhaps the world is changing. Perhaps there is hope for peace between our peoples after all." Kratha's expression softened slightly. "You have my blessing, human. Treat her well, honor her always, and you will have no trouble from me or mine." "Thank you," Marcus said, emotion thick in his throat. "That means more than you know." The council left the next morning, and Urgoth stayed behind to help with the winter preparations. The three of them, Marcus, Gracia, and Urgoth, worked to turn the farm into a place that could support them all comfortably through the cold months. They insulated the barn better, stocked the root cellar to overflowing, and made sure there was enough firewood to last until spring. As the first real snow began to fall, Marcus found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed in just a few short months. He had gone from a lonely widower struggling to keep his farm running and raise his daughter alone to being part of a family again, albeit an unconventional one. He had found love in the most unexpected place, with someone who challenged him to be better and showed him new ways of seeing the world. On the winter solstice, the shortest and darkest day of the year, Gracia came to Marcus with a request. In Orcish tradition, the solstice is a time for making commitments, for declaring intentions to the community. "I would like to speak to you and my father together, if you are willing." They gathered in the main room of the house after Lily had gone to sleep, the fire burning bright and warm. Gracia stood before them, her back straight and her expression serious but peaceful. "Father, Marcus, I want to thank you both for the gifts you have given me. Father, you never stopped searching for me, never gave up hope even when years passed with no word. Marcus, you saw me at my lowest and offered kindness without expecting anything in return. Both of you have helped me remember who I am and imagine who I might become." She took a deep breath, then continued. "I have thought long and hard about my future, about where I belong and what I want from life. And I have decided that I want to stay here, on this farm, building a life with Marcus if he will have me. Not as his servant or employee, but as his partner in all things." Urgoth's expression was unreadable for a moment, then he smiled broadly. "You have my blessing, daughter. You have found a good man, one who will stand beside you through whatever challenges come. I am proud of you and the choice you have made." Marcus stood, his heart pounding. "Gracia, I would be honored to build a life with you. I love you, and I want to spend my days working beside you, laughing with you, facing whatever the future brings together." Gracia crossed the room and took his hands, her grip strong and sure. "Then let this be our promise to each other. To build a home where humans and orcs can live in peace. To raise Lily to know that love transcends the boundaries we are told should divide us. To be partners in work and in heart, for as long as we both shall live." "That is my promise to you as well," Marcus said. And then he kissed her, deep and meaningful, sealing their commitment before her father and whatever gods might be watching. Urgoth cleared his throat loudly and they broke apart, both grinning. "If you two are finished making promises, I have some news of my own. The council has asked me to return to our main settlement in the spring to continue my peace negotiations with the human territories. They believe that your relationship, Marcus and Gracia, can serve as an example of what is possible when our peoples choose understanding over hatred." "What does that mean exactly?" Marcus asked, his arm still around Gracia's waist. "It means that you may receive visitors, both orc and human, who want to see for themselves this farm where a human and an orc have built a life together. It means you may be called upon to speak at councils and gatherings, to share your story. It will not always be easy, and there will be those who oppose what you represent. But if you are willing, you can help change the world for the better." Marcus looked at Gracia, who looked back at him with determination and hope in her amber eyes. "What do you think?" he asked her. "I think we have already started something important here. Why not share it with others who might need to see that peace is possible?" Gracia squeezed his hand. "We do this together or not at all." "Together then," Marcus agreed. They spent the rest of the winter in a kind of peaceful happiness that Marcus had not known was possible. The days were filled with work and laughter, the evenings with stories and songs and quiet conversations by the fire. Lily flourished, her education now including both human and orcish traditions, her worldview expanding to encompass possibilities that most children her age would never imagine. Marcus and Gracia grew closer with each passing day, learning the small intimacies of partnership. They worked together seamlessly now, each anticipating the other's needs and movements. They talked late into the night about their hopes and fears, their past traumas and future dreams. And yes, they loved each other with a passion that was both fierce and tender, discovering together what it meant to truly see and be seen by another person. When spring came, bringing with it the thaw and the promise of new growth, Urgoth prepared to leave for his peace negotiations. The night before his departure, he called Marcus and Gracia together for a private conversation. "I am giving you both my formal blessing to marry, if that is what you choose," Urgoth said. "In orcish tradition, a marriage requires the consent of the clan chief, and as Gracia's father and her chief, I grant that consent freely and joyfully." Marcus and Gracia looked at each other, the question hanging unspoken between them. They had talked about marriage in abstract terms, as something that might happen someday when the time was right. But now, faced with the concrete possibility, Marcus felt both excitement and nervousness. "I would be honored to marry you," he said to Gracia, "if you will have me." "Yes," Gracia said simply, her smile radiant. "Yes, I will marry you, Marcus de Lacroix. I will bind my life to yours in the sight of our peoples and whatever gods might care to witness it." They married 2 weeks later in a ceremony that blended human and orcish traditions. The town priest, initially reluctant, agreed to officiate after Urgoth had a pointed conversation with him about the importance of peace and understanding. Half the town turned out to witness the unprecedented event, some out of genuine support and others out of sheer curiosity. Gracia wore a dress that Marcus had commissioned from the local seamstress, simple but beautiful in deep green fabric that complemented her skin. She had flowers woven into her dark hair, and her tusks were painted with intricate designs that Urgoth said represented joy and new beginnings. Marcus wore his best clothes, feeling somewhat plain beside his bride's exotic beauty, but Gracia looked at him as if he were the most handsome man in the world. They exchanged vows before the assembled crowd, Marcus's words in common tongue and Gracia's in a mixture of common and orcish. When the priest pronounced them married, the response from the crowd was mixed cheers from some, silence from others, a few muttered disapprovals. But Marcus only had eyes for his wife, for the tears of joy streaming down her green cheeks and the way she held his hands as if she would never let go. The celebration afterward was unlike anything the town had seen before. Urgoth had brought orcish musicians who played instruments that sounded wild and strange to human ears, but that made Gracia light up with recognition and delight. There was dancing, both the formal human kind and the more exuberant orcish style that involved a lot of stomping and shouting. There was food from both cultures, plates piled high with roasted meats and strange root vegetables and breads made with unfamiliar grains. Lily danced with everyone who would partner her, her laughter ringing out across the gathering. She had a new dress for the occasion, and she twirled in it endlessly, showing it off to anyone who would look. When she grew tired, she climbed into Gracia's lap and declared loudly, "Now I have a mama again, and she is the best mama in the whole world." Gracia held her close, tears flowing freely now, and kissed the top of Lily's blonde head. "And you are the best daughter I could have hoped for." As the sun set, and the celebration wound down, Marcus and Gracia slipped away to the house they now officially shared. Urgoth had tactfully announced he would be sleeping in the barn that night, and had taken Lily with him for a special grandfather-granddaughter camping adventure, giving the newlyweds privacy. In the quiet of their bedroom, Marcus and Gracia came together not just with passion but with profound gratitude and love. They took their time, exploring and discovering, learning what brought each other pleasure and joy. Gracia's strength and Marcus's gentleness complemented each other perfectly, and when they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, both were smiling with a contentment that went soul deep. "I never imagined I could have this," Gracia whispered into the darkness. "A home, a family, a husband who loves me. It feels like a dream." "If it is a dream, I never want to wake," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. "You have given me so much, Gracia. Purpose, joy, hope for a better future. I love you more than I have words to express." "Then show me instead," Gracia said with a mischievous smile, and Marcus laughed and did exactly that. The months that followed were not without challenges. There were townspeople who refused to accept the marriage, who muttered about unnatural unions and the degradation of human society. There was an incident where someone threw rocks at Gracia when she went to town for supplies, and Marcus had to physically restrain himself from hunting down the culprits. There were letters from distant relatives expressing shock and disapproval at his choice of wife, but there were also triumphs. The farm flourished under their combined efforts, producing the best harvest Marcus had ever seen. Other orcs began to visit, drawn by stories of the peaceful farm where one of their own had found happiness with a human. Some stayed to work for a season, learning farming techniques they could take back to their own communities. Human farmers, initially suspicious, began to see the benefits of cooperation and started cautiously reaching out to establish trade relationships with nearby orc settlements. Marcus and Gracia became ambassadors of a sort, traveling with Urgoth to councils and gatherings to speak about their experience. They told their story honestly, not glossing over the prejudice and hardship they faced, but also emphasizing the joy and fulfillment they had found in choosing love over fear. Slowly, gradually, attitudes began to shift. It was not a complete transformation, not a sudden end to centuries of mistrust and hatred, but it was a beginning. 2 years after their marriage, Gracia came to Marcus with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant, carrying their child. The pregnancy was closely monitored by both human midwives and orcish healers, everyone anxious about this unprecedented mixing of bloodlines. But Gracia remained healthy and strong throughout, working on the farm almost until the day she went into labor. Their son was born on a summer evening, arriving with a lusty cry that echoed across the farm. He had his mother's green-tinged skin and his father's blue eyes, tiny tusks that were barely visible, and a shock of dark hair. They named him Thomas, after the neighbor who had helped them in their time of need, with an orcish second name that meant bridge builder. Lily, now 10 years old, was absolutely besotted with her baby brother. She helped care for him constantly, singing him songs in both languages and telling him stories about the farm and the family that had come together in such an unexpected way. Urgoth, upon seeing his grandson for the first time, wept openly. "He is proof," the old orc said, cradling the baby with infinite gentleness. "Proof that our peoples can create something beautiful together. Proof that the future does not have to repeat the mistakes of the past." As Marcus stood watching his wife nurse their son, with Lily curled against Grasha's side and Urgoth standing guard over them all, he felt a sense of completion that he had never expected to find. This strange, blended family that had come together through a single act of intervention in a market square had become the center of his world, the source of all his joy and purpose. He thought about the man he had been, standing in that square with his daughter's hand in his, watching a merchant strike a kneeling orc woman. He had not known then that he was staring at his future wife, that the simple act of defending a stranger would reshape his entire life. He had just known that it was wrong, that he had to act, that some things mattered more than personal safety or social approval. That instinct, that moment of moral clarity, had led to everything good in his life now. It had brought Grasha to him, had reunited her with her father, had created a family that defied all convention and expectation. It had started a movement, small but growing, toward peace and understanding between peoples who had been at war for generations. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, winter giving way to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall and back to winter again. The farm prospered, expanded, became known throughout the region as a place where anyone, human or orc, could find fair work and honest pay. More mixed couples began to appear, emboldened by Marcus and Grasha's example. The town that had once been deeply suspicious began to adapt, began to see the economic and social benefits of cooperation rather than division. Lily grew into a remarkable young woman, fluent in both languages, comfortable in both cultures, a living bridge between the two worlds. She became a teacher, traveling to both human and orc communities to share knowledge and promote understanding. Thomas, as he grew, showed signs of possessing the best qualities of both his parents, his mother's strength and his father's compassion, his mother's connection to orcish traditions and his father's human pragmatism. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus and Grasha took a rare day away from the farm, leaving the children in Urgoth's capable care and riding out to a meadow they had discovered years ago. They spread a blanket in the grass and lay looking up at the clouds, hands intertwined. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Choosing this life? You could have gone back to your people, could have found an orc husband, lived a more traditional life." "Never," Grasha said firmly. "This is exactly the life I was meant to have. You are exactly the partner I was meant to find." "We have built something extraordinary here, Marcus. Not just a farm or a family, but hope. Every time someone tells me that our marriage gave them courage to reach out across the divide, every time I see a human and orc child playing together without fear, I know we made the right choice." "I feel the same," Marcus said. "You saved me, you know. After my first wife died, I was just going through the motions of living, doing what needed to be done but feeling no real joy. You brought color back to my world, gave me purpose beyond mere survival." Grasher rolled onto her side, propping herself up to look down at him. "We saved each other. You gave me freedom, dignity, love. You showed me that not all humans are like the ones who bought and sold me. You proved that kindness and courage still exist in this world." They kissed then, long and deep and full of the passion that had not diminished despite years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they rode back to the farm. They could see smoke rising from the chimney, could hear Lily's voice calling the chickens in for the evening, could see Ergoth walking with little Thomas on his shoulders. Home, family, love. Marcus had stood between an orc servant and her master in a market square 5 years ago, had defended a stranger because it was the right thing to do, had made a promise he could not afford to keep. That single moment of intervention had changed everything, had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just his life, but the lives of everyone he touched. He had stood between Gracia and her abuser, not knowing who her father was, not knowing the political implications or the historical significance. He had simply seen a person in need and acted. And that action, that fundamental human decency in the face of injustice, had become the foundation of everything good that followed. As they approached the farm, Gracia squeezed his hand and said softly, "Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for being brave enough to intervene." "Thank you for being brave enough to trust me," Marcus replied. "Thank you for building this life with me, for loving me despite everything that said we should be enemies." They dismounted and were immediately surrounded by their family. Lily chattering about her day and Thomas reaching for his mother with chubby green arms and Ergoth announcing that he had made his famous stew for dinner. They went inside together, this family that should not exist by all conventional wisdom, but that was more real and more loving than most. And as they gathered around the table for the evening meal, sharing food and stories and laughter, Marcus looked at each beloved face and felt a profound gratitude for the path that had led him here. He had started as a single father doing his best to raise his daughter alone. He had become a husband, a father again, a son-in-law, a bridge between two worlds. All because he had chosen compassion over indifference, action over passivity, love over fear. The story of the single dad who stood between an orc servant and her master, not knowing who her father was, became legend in the region. It was told to children of both species as an example of the good that could come from simple acts of kindness. It inspired songs and poems, prompted policy changes, opened doors that had been closed for generations. But for Marcus and Gracia, it was not a legend or a story. It was simply their life, the beautiful, complicated, joyful reality they had built together from a moment of crisis in a market square. They lived it every day in the work they shared, the children they raised, the love they nurtured and protected. And years later, when Marcus was old and gray and Gracia's dark hair had become streaked with silver, when their children had children of their own, and the farm had become a thriving community rather than a solitary homestead, they would still remember that first meeting. The kneeling woman with a bruise on her cheek, the farmer who could not walk away from injustice, the moment when two lives collided and changed the world, one small act of courage at a time. They had built their happily ever after not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through daily choices to love, to trust, to bridge the divides that others said were unbridgeable. And in the end, that was the greatest story of all, not the tale of how they met, but the tale of how they stayed, how they built, how they loved through all the challenges and triumphs that life brought their way. Together, They had proven that family was not about blood or species or tradition. Family was about the people you chose to stand beside, the people you defended when they could not defend themselves, the people you built a life with one day at a time. And in that profound truth, they found not just happiness but peace, not just love but purpose, not just a home but a legacy that would endure for generations to come.